Hey guys, it's Matt Fagioli. Welcome back to the Certain Success Podcast. Today's episode is a little different, kind of special. I had the opportunity to be a guest on another podcast recently for my friend Travis Albritton, who works with me on the Certain Success Podcast as well. Anyway, we had an amazing conversation. It turned out to be really, really inspired, talking about business networking, business development, entrepreneurship, the state of digital marketing in 2023, just a ton. So if you're any kind of business owner or entrepreneur, and you probably are if you're here at the Certain Success Podcast, definitely sit down, dial in, get your notebook out, and check out this conversation with myself and my good friend, Travis Albritton. And here we go.
So Matt, we have gotten to know each other very quickly over the last month and a half, 2 months or so. It feels like I've known you forever at this point for how much time we spent together. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today, really just talk about your particular expertise in your previous businesses, but also talk about what you're doing now, which is really cool. So just to kind of start off, why don't you walk us through your journey as an entrepreneur, starting with maybe your first job in business or sales or marketing, and then what you were working on right up until, 2020, a year that people know for various reasons, may or may not have shut down the global economy, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just kind of give us a big picture of your background in entrepreneurship.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. And I'm one of those guys that, started cutting lawns when I was 10 years old and, built piles of money and always bought, stuff and did, constantly moving. So I think I've been an entrepreneur since birth. But my first real career of, sales, from 21 or whenever it was, I was working for my dad and his business partner, and we were manufacturers reps in a really sophisticated business selling a high dollar, very complex OEM electronic components. And I actually kind of had no business in that role because most of the guys that I was selling against were electrical engineers selling to engineers, a very, very technical job. But I did succeed and was actually, hugely successful in that arena. But, um, you know, to say that I am and have always have been a serial entrepreneur is very true. But in that role, which I did for almost a decade, I got to touch the inside of thousands of businesses, both all of the customers and then all of the products and services that we represented, which the products and services that we repped ranged from small mom and pop US based manufacturer to multinational, multi-billion dollar global corporations from all over the globe. And the same was true on the customer side. So had tons and tons and tons of business experience in businesses that I participated in some way as, a product partner. But not necessarily just the businesses that I was running, which I've, run a multitude of those businesses in my career as well.
So then walk me up to your events business, how that started, kind of the origin of that, and what you specifically did. Because, events business is very niche, and then you had a niche within a niche, or a niche, however you want to pronounce it, for how you approached it. So I'd love to hear that story, because then I want to tease out some principles that would be applicable no matter what kind of business somebody has.
Sure, absolutely. I think that people greatly underestimate the power of live event as a business, and at the same time, I think we're in a place where in the world where the power of live event networking has been lost a little bit as well. And so both of those things were things that I cared a lot about. I think they're very, very much tied to who I am as a person and a businessman. And so, one of the biggest lessons that I think we can share with your listeners in terms of the subset of those who are thinking, man, I'd like to maybe start a live event, is that it's much better to think about live events in terms of corporate sponsorship partners and some level of scale uh, versus most people that do a live event for their own business or for whatever are really just thinking about in terms of the audience and attendee dollars and very attendee focused business model. And of course, the attendee and their experience is hugely important, but it's much more powerful to figure out, who are the large corporate partners who are going to be interested in this audience and trying to build those partnerships in advance. And part of what goes with that is then the expectation from those sponsors that you're going to deliver something really specific for them. And so it's a little bit, not a little bit, it's very important to have figured those things out in advance if you want to have a very successful, very profitable live event or series of events.
Well, and pre-selling is such a powerful tool once you learn how to do it and how to execute it, right? So gauging the temperature of something before you go all in and commit a ton of funding to it. It's like, yeah, you could jump in and be like, we're going to create a live event in our local area about our expertise. All right, we've reserved the venue and we got, the t-shirts made, and now we just got to tell people about it. And let's go try and find some sponsors. And you've committed all this capital to this thing. Well, then actually like seeing, is there an appetite for this? Are we going to be able to secure things up front? And so being able to sell the idea of like, this is what we will do, this is what we can do, and then kind of having all those pieces aligned ahead of time, so that way it's more of a certain success. Wink, wink. Well, that's called foreshadowing. We're foreshadowing something later in the episode. But I think that's really smart. It's like, let's secure the number one customer of this event up front. The company, the brand is going to kind of be the face of it. And then all the other pieces will fall into place after that. And I think that's just really powerful if you're launching a new service or new product. It's like, before you build anything, before you build a website or a landing page, just like see if people want it. Be like, hey, would you give me $50 to do X, Y, or Z? Okay, well, what about $100? What about $200? And you are able to test ideas quickly and see, is this going to work or not? So that way you don't commit so much capital and so much of an investment to something only to find out it was just a good idea in your head, but not necessarily in the minds of the people you're trying to serve.
Yeah, that's interesting that you touched on that, because pre-selling, as you called it, I guess I never used that particular term, but it's something that I've always done and always believed in, and it's been around a long time. And I learned it. I mentioned I had represented some large multinationals, and they taught me that. So here's these guys that sell products that require billions of dollars worth of capital investment in order to build said product. So let's say it's a TV. That's not what we did, but let's say it's a television set, and the production line for that television set is going to cost $1 billion. They sort of want to know before they do that if it's going to sell or not. And so they would come work with us and come to our local region, and we would go and call on a bunch of customers and ask that customer if they would buy this thing. Part of the game of that is I'd learned after the fact, we weren't really telling the customer that the product didn't exist yet, because there was a spec and whatever. But, I learned after a while that, this is not going to exist unless there's enough customers for it, and yada, yada. So you get the idea. But I think that the way that people can use that model today, whether it's a live event or a course you're selling online or anything else, is, people always think they have to build the course. Well, no, you don't. I mean, you could run an ad to the course and see if the ad works first. You don't have to take anybody's money. You can build a list. Hey, we're about to release this course, and it's going to cost X, and put your name on the early bird list, and you get a free, Travis's PDF or whatever it is. And so, yeah, there's lots of ways to pre-sell, and it's a huge thing. And live event, I think, is a really great example of that. It's a little bit of a challenge in that you need a venue, and sometimes it can be a little bit of a challenge to pre-sell an event if you haven't committed the venue. But you also can, in a lot of cases, you can get preliminary commitment on the venue without too much risk as well.
Yeah, or doing it far enough out in advance that you can get a refund if you have to cancel or things like that. Yeah, and there are definitely honest and dishonest ways of pre-selling. Um, I've always been of the mind of be super transparent, let people know what they're signing up for, and then also let them know like if I end up not making this thing, here's how I'm going to give you your money back, right? Even though you put this deposit in. So, but yeah, being able to test the market before you make something, usually a good idea. Now, one of the things that I imagine must be true for an events business is that it really depends on who you know, especially if it's more B2B focused, finding brands, finding sponsors, and there's totally different sales cycles with B2B versus B2C businesses. But your superpower is definitely, lots and lots of people. And, just in my brief time knowing you, I'm always amazed at like, oh, well, I know so-and-so, I'll just text him right now. Like, oh, he just replied. It's like, wow, that's cool. I don't have that superpower. So I would just love selfishly for you to break down like how you do that, how you think about networking, how you think about staying connected, and even more so, like how do you identify the right people to pursue connections with, right? Because it's not about knowing everybody, it's about knowing the right people, at least the way that I think about it. But I'd love to hear your perspective and how you think about networking and staying connected.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that. I think that is kind of a superpower for me. I think it's just in bent the way I'm bent, and but it's certainly a muscle that I've developed over some decades. And I think the biggest piece of that, you and I were talking off camera about sort of the local networking event where you meet the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, as I refer to it. And um, those networking events are generally not very helpful unless you're the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, and everything about your world is within a 10-mile radius, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're wanting to build a live event, and maybe bigger than that, you want to build the right network in whatever your chosen career path is. I think people have a little bit lost the art of networking at the national level, and what that looks like is it's actually easy to do. It's show up at the national level events for your industry. Um, buy very expensive tickets to very expensive events, and you find that the people that are standing in that room are the people who could afford the ticket, and a lot of times they're the players. And so I've morphed my business and my channel and everything about my career many times in 35 years, but I've always found that to be true, that you can put yourself in the room and network your way to some very important people, much more quickly than people realize. So podcasting is a new world for me that I'm learning somewhat from you. And but I just bought a very expensive ticket to an event in coming up in August, podcast event in Denver. And I promise you I will come out of there with a couple handfuls of really important contacts. And then when you want to get something done, you want to text somebody and get an answer. If you had a beer with that guy, or whatever it is, it's just a whole lot easier. And I think that that's a little bit becoming a bit of a lost art, and some of that's due to the COVID season that we just went through, and all of that. But I think there's a huge appetite for it too. I think if you're listening to this, I bet you that there's space for not only for you to do the networking piece, but for you to build a very niche live event in your space for sure.
So a couple things I want to follow up on. The first one, this idea of showing up to a conference and leaving with a bunch of contacts. That may seem like, oh yeah, of course I would do that. That's not a common knowledge thing, Matt. So I'm gonna need you to tease out what that looks like. What does it mean to grab beer with somebody? How do you enter that conversation? How do you introduce yourself? How do you make that connection, get that time in those initial conversations? What are your goals? They may be even like subconscious, like my only goal is that he knows I'm a great guy, and then we swap contacts and that's it. Or my goal is I want him to know who I am and what I do, and I want to get to know more about him and what he does so I can make a connection to build some rapport very quickly. Like, walk me through like the kinds of things you're thinking about when you go to an event where you're trying to make connections. who are you looking to connect with beyond the people that are there? Like, how do you then self-select down, like, these are the 20 people that matter the most to me right now? And then how do you make that connection? Like, what is your strategy? It's like pickup lines for business leaders, right? It's like, how do you pick up a girl at a bar? How do you pick up a business leader at a conference?
Yeah. That's funny that we're talking about. I love this conversation because it's been so long since I've really thought about how or why I do what I do. But I think maybe it's like, well, how do you not pick up a girl at a bar? You How do you not pick up a girl? You try too hard. You over impress her. All the things, right? We all know what we shouldn't do. And so I think it's very, very, very low key. My goals are always put as many cards in as many hands as possible. Another lost art that lots of people don't carry cards. I'm still a huge fan of cards, both giving and receiving paper cards, because I would walk out with this fistful of cards and have sort of go through them the next day or in my hotel room, or like what are the ones I care about. I've got like cases of them that I'll never look at again, but that's probably interesting in and of itself. I would always get on the plane to go home, have 25 cards, and if I kept them all, I would pick the 2 or 3 that really mattered and then go deep on the follow up with those 3 people and never do much other than maybe a quick response, quick email to the other 25. But the 3 that really, really mattered, I would really do something memorable in my follow up to that person. And so just to kind of make sure that I covered it. Yeah, I think you want to be just, hi, how you doing? Shake hands. This is who I am. And then it's all in the post event follow up with the person or persons that you thought were the most important.
Yeah, because nobody loves being pitched to. It's like, especially when you feel like you're getting bum rushed into it. It's like, hey, how's it going? Oh, I'm so and so. Oh, are you looking for qualified leads in your business? Because we can totally do that for you. What can we set up? And it's like, listen, dude, I'm here at a conference. I'm trying to go to a talk. I don't want to listen to a sales pitch, right? And so I definitely think there can be a thought of, strike when the iron is hot. I have them. They're right across from me. Make it count right now. And you have, again, that like high pressure, like mentality of like, close the sale right now. Instead of, let's just plant the seed. He knows who I am now. She knows who I am now. Great. They gave me their email address. They gave me permission to reach out to them. And then taking the time to think about what you're going to say that's memorable. I think that too is really important, because it's not about, I get LinkedIn DMs all the time. Yours stood out. I actually responded to yours. That's how you found me, or connected. And so, but there are ones all the time. It's like, no, I'm not interested. I know exactly where this is going. Not something I'm interested in doing. And I think the higher caliber individual that you want to go after or connect with, they will appreciate just starting with that human connection without any kind of like preconditions, or, hey, I'm only interested in you because of your business's marketing budget, or I'm only interested in you because I think you can give me money. People can smell that. People can sniff out that, the motivation behind that if it's less than authentic. So I think it's, whether you've like actually processed, this is why I do what I do and why it works or why it doesn't work. From my perspective, that's why I think what you do is so brilliant.
Well, thanks. Well, I think it's so baked in. It's not that I'm not conscious of it anymore, but it's so baked in that, it's once you develop any muscle, it's not something you have to think too much about, but it's really an important conversation. And I think for all you youngins there, now that, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but now that, my business is much more digital and I'm having tons of interactions with younger entrepreneurs who are, in the Insta, DMs and, all the new methods. And it's so salesy and so pushy and so, over the top. And what I'm telling you is the exact opposite. Like I don't want to feel any sales from you at all. And you're actually going to be way better off. You're going to have much better sales result. It was actually really nice to I must be getting nicer in my old age, but this person who I had had some interaction with on Instagram, and I think it was a she, anyways, like hitting me like over. And this is something that I'm mildly interested in, and maybe interested in it next month. And it was just like every 5 seconds, and I'm like, you would probably get way more from me if you would just ease up a little bit. So anyway, but you made the point earlier that the bigger the target, the higher level the target, the more critical that is, and the fewer words you want to say about anything. Because that guy, I have a guy in my mind that is an actual billionaire that I had the opportunity to have a meeting with. Oh gosh, it's probably been 6 months ago now, but I was introduced to this guy, and I said like literally nothing. And then, I mean, enough to like, hello, shook his hand, but I was like, I'm not going to say anything to this guy about anything. And, but after the event, I had the person that introduced me, ping that person with just a teeny tiny bit, sent that person something that I hoped would be memorable, which obviously isn't about the cost of the item, because guy's a billionaire, can't impress him that way, right? But just touched him. Hey, remember I met you. Here's this thing. Would you spend time with me? And then I got to spend some time with him. And I think this is informative. We talked about, going to the national events, whatever. I got to spend time with this guy because I found out where he was going to be. I flew to that event, which cost a fortune, but I got to spend 90 minutes with the billionaire target that I specifically was interested in. And people just don't do that. So
No, well, because it's relational selling, right? It's not transactional selling, and you have to go into it with the mindset of, I'm willing for this to not go anywhere, professional, like business wise. I'm totally willing for this to fizzle out and to be an investment or an at bat that may turn into something, and it may not. And I have the patience to let these things play out because I know in the long run, this is going to turn out better. But that is so counterintuitive to the way that I've seen a lot of business start operating, which is much more like, what have you done for me lately? What are your sales figures this week? How do we tweak this, optimize this? And it's, again, it's getting away from the long game of relational selling and, marketing your business through word of mouth and recommendations, which is still how most businesses grow. Like that's their number one marketing lever, is people talking about them and recommending them. But it's so powerful because we all love to be sold that way. It's like, I would love for someone I trust to recommend a product that will help me. Like that's how I want to buy all my stuff. But instead, most of the marketing is, you're terrible. You're a loser. You're so sad and depressed. Buy this and you'll be so happy. Right. And that's like the opposite of what's good for me and beneficial for me. And so, if we just kind of like take a step back for a second and take a deep breath and be like, how would I want someone to treat me and consider me and my needs and what I'm going through and what I'm dealing with before they roll out the sales pitch? I think we'd be much better off.
yeah, I think, wow, it's really just an interesting conversation in the context of all the stuff that especially our digital sales space, where it is like, your life is absolutely horrible and it would be way better if you did X, Y, and Z. And, but yeah, so, it is intentional, and it's not that I certainly didn't fly to that event expecting anything less. I mean, I was on target on purpose. Like I had a sales intent. But it's more, I guess what I was delivering is just that people don't appreciate the power of that face-to-face meeting. And I think a little bit to one of your points there is that everyone these days expects you wouldn't go to the meeting unless it was like done deal or like you're sure. And like, no, that's not it. You go to the meeting to get the deal. And so there's a little bit of a lost art there for sure.
So before we wrap up, I want to transition and start talking about what you're doing right now. We've kind of alluded to it a couple times, but talk to me about the new coaching business that you've been starting up, how you decided to do that, how you're building on the success you've had as an entrepreneur in the past to serve other entrepreneurs, and tease that out a little bit, because I think a good number of people listening to this podcast will enjoy your new podcast and your newsletter as well.
Cool. Well, thanks for bringing that up. I think, um, and we've covered a little bit in my background, but I've had so much diverse business experience, and got all this silver in my beard, and I at that season of life where I'm like, I really would love to help a bunch of other entrepreneurs level up their business to a new place, and help them not step on some of the million landmines that I've stepped on in my career. um, and you and I met and have talked a ton about faith, but I think that there's well, not only a new hunger but a needed hunger in the U.S. and elsewhere for a real understanding of what faith in Jesus Christ is and has always been, what he actually said versus the way it sort of gets practiced in the world these days, and how that relates into your actual business and your day-to-day life, and tying those two pieces together. Our new podcast for the Certain Success brand, we say, standing at the intersection of business and faith. And I spent the last 20 years as an entrepreneur trying to walk out that balance of like, hey, I want to go win in the world, I want to feed my family, I want to do all these things while I'm here on earth. But at the end of the day, I'd like to have become what God made me to be, and get to the next place, um, and feel like I accomplished as closely to what He had in mind as possible.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity of being a guest on your show, and it was a lot of fun. And we talked about a lot of those themes of bridging that gap of faith and business, and how do they interrelate. They're not mutually exclusive; like they work together if we're intentional about it. And so, yeah, if you were definitely like a spiritually minded, faith oriented entrepreneur, and you want to explore what that looks like, but also hear like business tactics and things that are working, like the conversation you just had with a different Travis. So I'm already a fan. Got two Travis guests early on in the podcast. You know how to pick them. uh, talking about AI tools and things like that. So if you're interested in those kind of things, definitely go check out the Certain Success podcast, which I'll link in the show notes. And then also talk about your newsletter, which is, you'd never really done anything like that before you started it, but now you have this daily newsletter going out. Tell me about that, and what that process has been like, starting that as a new endeavor, and what you've been learning through that.
Sure. Well, I think maybe this will be helpful too to some of the seniors like myself that may catch this podcast. The I've been a tech guy my whole career, as we've talked about, always try to stay on top of things, but we've entered a new era of digital marketing and content marketing in particular. And I have had to go through a really big shift to keep up and learn, what does it look like to be a digital content marketer in 2023. And so I've discovered, with lots of help from smart guys like you, what in my view, the four pillars of that is newsletter, or we'll call it email marketing, um, YouTube, podcast, and book writing. And I think anybody who wants to do anything going forward in the next 10 years had better be winning one or all of those pillars at a high level. And I had never really been a writer, been a speaker and a salesman and a marketer and a lot of things, but never been a writer. And I set a goal to write every day starting January 1st. And so I just started writing a newsletter. And that is still an embarrassingly small audience, but that was not my objective. My objective was to learn how to write, um, develop the voice for this new brand, Certain Success, and really try to get clarity on what the heck am I saying and selling, and what's the message of this new company, and who do I want to help, what's my avatar, and all those things come out of writing. And now I'll be completing the 5th month of writing every single day, and I've got a book in process and everything else. But what you learn is that becoming a great content marketer is about starting and creating content and making every piece better than the one before and developing this muscle. And so for me, that started with writing, has moved into the podcast. And I think that that's the world, that's the marketing world that we're in.
Certainly is. I mean, it's why we're here right now, right? It's to host these conversations and be able to share them with others that would find it valuable. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and expertise. All the links to the newsletter, podcast, everything else that you're doing will be down in the show notes. But again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot.